Good evening and welcome back to our study in the book of Genesis. As we begin, I would like to share a short prayer from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. May God lead us in his kindness through the course of time, but above all, may he lead us to himself. All right, let's look at our slides. We'll be looking at chapters 39 through 45. God was with Joseph. And we'll start with some Peanuts, an old Peanuts cartoon. Lucy's reading some history. She says, "I knew I was right. I knew it. There was a day just like today, back in 1935. This isn't a new year at all. This is a used year. I'm going to write a strong letter of protest." And Linus asks, "Who's in charge of years?" It's a good question. Who's in charge of history? Well, chapter 39, God is with Joseph in Egypt, in slavery and in prison. Joseph, betrayed and sold by his brothers, has been taken from the land of his birth to Egypt. He now serves Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. But the Lord is with Joseph, and he becomes successful in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his eyes and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. And so it was from the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field. So Joseph is not alone. He has not been forgotten. 5 times in 4 verses, God's presence and blessing are mentioned. The God of Israel is in Egypt. Well, the plot thickens. Joseph was handsome and good looking. And literally, it's beautiful in form and beautiful in appearance. The exact words used about Rachel, his mother, in chapter 29, like mother, like son. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my hand. There is no one greater in this house than I am, and he has not kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. Well, if she can't lie with him, she's going to lie about him. One day when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and went outside. So she calls in the men and blames her husband for bringing this Hebrew among us to laugh at us, to mock us. "He tried to lie with me, but I cried out with a loud voice. He left his garment beside me and ran outside." She then repeats the same thing about the Hebrew slave to her husband. But the Lord is with Joseph. In anger, Potiphar puts him in prison, where the king's prisoners were confined. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the house of confinement. And he became responsible for everything that was done there. The warden paid no heed to anything that was in Joseph's hand, because the Lord was with him. Whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. So that God was with Joseph does not mean he had a trouble-free life, obviously, or that God kept him, protected him from the consequences of his actions or from others' malice or animosity. Surface circumstances, external conditions are no indication that God is uninterested, uninvolved, uncaring, or unable to do anything. Rather, God will sustain and bless Joseph through every trial, and the final outcome is sure. Chapter 40. The king puts two officers in prison, the chief baker and the chief cupbearer. They continue some time there in custody. One night, each one dreams a dream. Next morning, Joseph notices they are troubled. Well, there's no one to interpret. And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell them, please, to me." So the chief cupbearer dreamed he saw a vine with 3 branches. Its blossoms sprouted, the clusters produced grapes. The butler squeezed the grapes into Pharaoh's cup and placed it in Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph explains, the 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you shall place Pharaoh's cup in his hand as before. Only remember me when it is well with you, and please do me the kindness to mention me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of this house. For I was indeed stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing, that they should put me into this pit, this dungeon. Well, the baker liked what he heard, and so he shared his dream. There were 3 baskets of bread on his head. The uppermost basket had all sorts of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds came and snatched them away. Joseph explains that the 3 baskets are 3 days. Within yet 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from upon you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat the flesh from upon you. Well, the 3rd day is Pharaoh's birthday. The cupbearer is restored to his position, and the baker is executed, as Joseph had interpreted. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. So the butler forgets. Egypt is going to forget. Will God forget? Joseph has to wait, like Abraham, like Jacob, like Rachel, like us. The future still belongs to God, though, and his sovereign purposes. One of my, probably the favorite movie of my young adolescent years was Robinson Crusoe on Mars. It's about the first U.S. manned mission to Mars, but the astronauts are forced to abandon ship and they descend to the surface of the planet. Only one survives. That would be Colonel Christopher Draper, Kit Draper. He is eventually joined by a runaway slave, an escaped intergalactic slave, whom Draper names Friday, and he begins to teach him English. Well, to escape the overlords, Draper and Friday are forced to travel below the canals of Mars. They eventually surface, maybe you can see them there, and they head for the polar ice cap to get water. And they have a discussion on the way about God, in whom they both believe, even though they come from different parts of the universe. You speak of God in terms of fatherhood and order and goodness. Well, Friday has breathing capsules or oxygen pills, and they are running low. And Friday stops taking his in order to save Kit or Draper. They reach the pole only to be rocked by a meteor collision. There's an avalanche, and the situation appears utterly hopeless. And Friday offers Draper one of his last oxygen pills. And he says, forget it. And Friday says, no, God, not forget. Well, chapter 41, 2 years go by, and the king of Egypt has a dream. He's standing by the Nile when 7 attractive, plump cows come up from the river. They are followed by 7 ugly, thin cows who then eat the healthy cows. And he dreams another dream. 7 plump, good ears of grain growing on a stalk are swallowed by 7 thin, blighted ears. Well, the next morning, Pharaoh awakes and he's troubled, but all the king's magicians, all the king's men cannot interpret Pharaoh's dream. Then the cupbearer remembers, he confesses and relates how Pharaoh put him in prison with the baker. And there a young Hebrew explained the meaning of their dreams. So Pharaoh calls for Joseph, who is brought out of the pit, out of the dungeon. Joseph shaves, changes clothes, comes before the king. Pharaoh says, I've dreamed a dream, and there's no one who can interpret it, but I've heard that you can. And Joseph says, it is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. So the king tells Joseph both dreams. Joseph says, God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows and ears of grain are 7 years of plenty. The 7 lean cows and empty ears are 7 years of famine. That will follow. These years of famine will consume the land of Egypt. And then Joseph advises Pharaoh to choose a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt, and appoint officers over the land and take 1/5 of the produce during these good years. Let them store up the grain under the hand of Pharaoh for food in the cities. Let them guard it so that the land may not perish. Well, the proposal pleases Pharaoh, and he places Joseph second in command over Egypt. So in effect, Joseph becomes an Egyptian. Pharaoh renames him Zaphanat Paneat, and he gives him in marriage to Asenat, the daughter of a very highly placed priest. So Joseph is 30 years old when he becomes prime minister, prisoner to prime minister, 13 years of hardship and trial. During the next 7 years, the earth produces abundantly. Joseph gathers all the food in Egypt and stores it in the cities, so much grain that it can't be measured. He has 2 sons. He names them Manasseh and Ephraim, and their names have meaning about God, who has made him forget and be fruitful in his affliction and hardship. Famine comes to Egypt. The people cry to Pharaoh for bread, and Pharaoh sends them to Joseph. Joseph opens the storehouses, sells food to the Egyptians. Moreover, all the earth comes to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain because the famine is so severe. Chapter 42. The famine, of course, reaches Canaan. Jacob hears that there is grain in Egypt and sends his sons to buy food. Benjamin, the youngest, son of Rachel, stays back. Well, Joseph, of course, is the governor of Egypt, and he has charge of selling the grain. His brothers bow before him, faces to the ground. They don't recognize him. He knows who they are, and he speaks harshly, roughly to them. Joseph remembers the dreams he dreamed, and he says, you are spies. You've come to see the nakedness of the land, where we're vulnerable to attack. No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We're honest men. We are not spies. Joseph doesn't accept that. And they explain, we, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in Canaan. The youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more. Joseph says, you are spies. And then he says, I'm going to test you. By the life of Pharaoh, you're not leaving unless your youngest brother comes down here. One of you, go, bring your brother. The rest of you have got to stay. We'll see if you're telling the truth. And Joseph puts all those brothers in prison for 3 days. And then on the third day, he says, do this and you will live, for I fear God. One of you will stay, remain in prison. The rest of you may take your grain and go, but don't return without your younger brother. And they say to each other, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother. That would be Joseph. And that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us and we did not listen. That is why this distress has come on us. Reuben says, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. Well, Joseph understands what they've said. He turns away and weeps. Then he returns and binds Simeon before their eyes. He gives orders to fill their bags with grain and also replace each one's money in his sack. They, of course, are not there to hear that. When the brothers discover the money, their hearts fail them. They turn trembling to one another, saying, what is this that God has done to us? So the brothers are miserable because of guilt, unforgiven, unconfessed guilt. They believe that they are bearing the punishment of God. Of course, the Egyptians could charge them with stealing, with theft. This reminds me of a movie I saw one time. I'm not recommending the film. David Mamet wrote the screenplay for it. It's about 3 men who survive a plane crash in the Alaskan wilderness, and one soon dies. The other 2 are threatened, menaced by a Kodiak bear. And the older man tells the younger, most people lost in the wild die of shame. In other words, they don't think they're worthy of living, and they give up. They quit trying, I think because of guilt. It seems to me that the remedy for guilt is confession and repentance and prayer. Well, the brothers tell their father what happened. The harsh words from the man, the binding of Simeon, the demand to bring Benjamin if they're to get any more food. Jacob says, you have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. And now you would take Benjamin. All this has come against me. Brigham remarks, Jacob's life is defined by the deception of his sons. He's been hurt too deeply. He's not going to risk anymore. He's forgotten the dream. Chapter 43. The famine is severe in Canaan. The family's grain runs out, and Jacob says, go again, buy us a little food that we may live. And Judah says, the man solemnly warned us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. Send the boy with me, Judah says. We will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones, and I will be a pledge for his safety. Well, Israel reluctantly agrees. He says, may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, and may he send back your other brother and Benjamin. And as for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. Well, the brothers travel to Egypt, and they stand before the man, and Joseph recognizes Benjamin. And he tells his steward, his manager, to prepare a dinner, a feast for his brothers to eat at noon with him. The brothers are brought to his house, and they think they're going to be arrested, assaulted, taken as slaves for stealing grain for the money that was found in their sacks. Simeon is brought out. Joseph comes in. His brothers bow, and Joseph asks, is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive? They answer, your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive. Joseph sees Benjamin, his brother, the son of his mother. Is this your youngest brother? God be gracious to you, my son. Joseph rushes out, for his compassion grew warm for his brother, and he sought a place to weep. He weeps in his chamber. He washes his face and returns. Well, portions of food are brought from Joseph's table to his brothers. They can't eat together. But Benjamin's portion is 5 times as much. as any of theirs. But chapter 44. Joseph instructs the steward to fill his brother's sacks with grain, to again return their money, and put his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. Next morning, he sends the steward to overtake and accuse him. On the way, the brothers invoke a death sentence on the thief. Whichever of your servants is found with the silver cup shall die, and we also will be my Lord's slaves. Each man opens his sack, the oldest to the youngest, and the cup is found in Benjamin's sack. The brothers tear their clothes in anguish and return with Benjamin to the city. Again, the brothers fall on their knees before Joseph, and Judah pleads for Benjamin. "O my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's ears, and let not your anger burn against your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself. My Lord asked his servants, saying, 'Have you a father or a brother?' And we said to my Lord, 'We have a father, an old man, and a young brother, the child of his old age. His brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children, and his father loves him.'" So already he's painting a picture of a vulnerable father and a loving family. "Now, therefore, as soon as I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, then as his life is bound up in the boy's life, as soon as he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. And your servants will bring down the gray hairs of your servant, our father, with sorrow to Sheol. For your servant became a pledge of safety for the boy to my father, saying, 'If I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father all my life. Now, therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father.'" Very tender plea. And Cass says about this is without doubt Judah's finest moment. Judah volunteers to be the ram instead of the lad. His offer to remain as Joseph's slave in Benjamin's stead is magnanimous and self-sacrificing. Judah, in effect, tells Joseph, "I may be your slave, and you therefore may be my master. But I belong first and most to my father, to whom I am pledged for my brother." 4 times in these last 3 verses, and twice in the last verse, does Judah utter the word Avi, my father. Judah obliges Joseph and us to consider the difference between a way of life in which supreme obligations and obedience are to the God King Pharaoh, and a way of life in which supreme obligations and obedience are to God, the true God, channeled through the Father as the head of the clan. Chapter 45. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him. He cried, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers, and he wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, please." And they came near, and he said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me. Do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen. and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, and your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. Therefore I will provide for you, for there are yet 5 years of famine to come. And now your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see, that it is my mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father of all my honor in Egypt and all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. After that, his brothers talked with him. Well, Pharaoh hears that Joseph's brothers have come, and he invites the entire family to join him. Best of the land is yours, he says. Joseph gives them wagons, provisions for the journey. Each brother receives a change of clothes, except Benjamin, who receives 5 changes of clothes and 300 shekels, which was a lot of money. To his father, Joseph sends 10 donkeys laden with the good things of Egypt, and 10 more donkeys laden with grain, bread, and provisions for the journey. He sends his brothers with these words, "Do not quarrel on the way." Well, they come to the land of Canaan, to Jacob their father, and they confess, Joseph is still alive, and he is ruler over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart goes numb, for he did not believe them. But when they told him all the words of Joseph, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. And Israel said, "It is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." Well, Joseph testifies that it's God, not the brothers, who sent him ahead to preserve a remnant, to save lives. Sons of Jacob had sold their brother as a slave, but the sovereign God works through, against, and in spite of human will and human action. Well, let me conclude with a short quote from Richard Wurmbrand and then a song. Wurmbrand was a prisoner for 14 years in communist prisons in Romania. In his autobiography, Tortured for Christ, he says, "I had very little hope of ever being released. Hungry, beaten, and drugged, we, the prisoners, had forgotten theology and the Bible. We could not think anymore. And so, in our darkest hours of torture, the Son of Man came to us, making the prison walls shine like diamonds and filling the cells with light. We would have not given up this joy for kingly palaces." Well, ultimately, of course, it is God who permits Joseph to be sold and to suffer. It is God who is with him, who blesses and prospers him, who sustains him every step of the way for a greater good, a purpose that is largely unseen, to preserve his people, to maintain his covenant, to fulfill the dream, to realize his promises, and to bless the world. I'd like to conclude with a beautiful song written by Mark Shipp and Michael Showalter, "The Lord is My Shepherd," based on the 23rd Psalm.
The Lord is my shepherd, I lie down in pastures green. For he is my guide, and he shall provide everything I ever need. He leads me by still waters, he revives my thirsty soul. In his righteousness he directs my steps, for his sake he makes me whole. And though I wander through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. You heads of my foes, and anointed me with your majesty. My cup fills and overflows. Surely goodness, love, and mercy shall forever follow me. In your house of praise I will spend my days, and will live eternally.